We are. I mean,
Okay.
Al will join us. Yes, sir.
I call the July 8th, Charlottesville City Council special meeting to order. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the Charlottesville, City Schools Facilities Construction Program. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Fleischer.
Here.
Vice Mayor Ostrand.
Here.
Councilor Payne.
Here.
Councilor Snook.
Here.
Mayor Wade.
Here. I'm going to turn this over now to, Mr. Freeze to, kind of get us going.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Mayor Wade, members of council, members of the school board. My name is James Freeze, Deputy City Manager. As noted this evening, we're going to be talking about the school construction program, and in particular, talking about the recently passed local option sales tax. So our intention this evening is to provide an overview of that referendum, the sales tax referendum process and the structure related to that. Provide you all with an update of that school construction program work. You'll recall last August during a joint meeting with the school board, we provided an overview of our school facilities and their needs. We're going to kind of update that information as work has been done on that. And then we're going to look at what the potential proceeds might look like from the sales tax revenue and the implementations around that. So 3 kind of major topics to cover, then we'll go over next steps, and then we look forward to questions and your all's feedback. So, Chrissy, are you manning this for me?
I thought it was. Stop sharing the tracking. Okay.
So yeah, those are our topics. So as you all are aware, the recently enacted state budget includes authorization for the city to conduct a referendum that would impose a local general retail sales tax at a rate not to exceed 1%. As you guys know, the revenue for that can only be used for school-related capital improvements, though it can be used to finance bonds or other loan financing costs for those projects. The work, so as you know, also it's not an action by council alone. It requires a referendum approved by the city's voters. That referendum is initiated by council resolution. We have at this point in time scheduled consideration of that resolution for July 20th, your meeting on July 20th. The resolution itself must identify the proposed tax, state the expiration date for the tax, and request that the circuit court order the referendum. We're using, in that draft resolution that we are preparing, we're using an anticipated deadline of June 30th, 2046, based on the 20-year maximum that's built into the budget as it was passed by the General Assembly. So the process as this moves forward, after the council adopts the resolution, we file a petition with the Charlottesville Circuit Court requesting entry of an order placing the referendum on the ballot. That referendum must be ordered by the court at least 81 days before the date for which the referendum election is called. So November 3rd is the election date, and so we're looking at August 14th as the deadline by which the court must act. And then if the majority of voters approve the referendum, council must then adopt an ordinance to actually impose the tax, and the tax goes into effect at least 120 days after the ordinance is adopted. So that is our overall process from here to the tax being in place.
And the clock ticking starts not when the ordinance is adopted or not when it goes into effect, but when it's.
When you pass the resolution, that's when that 20-year clock begins, right? So that 20-year window in which to collect that sales tax revenue would actually begin at the point at which council passes the resolution.
So if, just to clarify, if we pass the resolution and the referendum votes no, that clock is still ticking so that if we try again at a later date.
That's an interesting question that we should look into, but I would say that's our understanding right now. Yeah.
Mr. Freeze?
Yeah.
So my question along those lines was, referendum, election day, and then you've got the 120 days before you can start to, receive, monies from that tax. So why wouldn't we push that expiration date out to at least November, not just based on the resolution, but when it passed and or when we start to receive the money?
So the way that the state law is set up, the as this was set up by the state, it is, the resolution is the, is what starts the clock. So we didn't have a choice. It's set by the state.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on that?
The draft resolution expiration date being June 30th, even though we wouldn't vote on it until July 20th, does that extra month?
I can follow up.
I think the way it's worded right now, it's, we could start it, or we could keep it running until July 20th of 2046. But that's just hopelessly confusing for merchants, it seems to me.
What do you mean?
Yeah, I'm sure
Well,
that the attorney probably is tying it to the, to the fiscal year.
And do they start collecting, do they stop collecting the extra 1% midway through the month and midway through the reporting period? And
Sure.
yeah,
Go ahead.
Good evening, Airway, members of council, members of school board, Michael Goddard, Deputy Director of Public Works. As James mentioned, I'm here to give you an update on some of our planning procedures since last time we updated you. So in the interim, we've put together a school facilities working group and we produced this facility needs report, or at least an overview of the report. It'll come out in a little more detail in the future, but we needed to rush something to you so you have a sense of what we've been working on. The working group was composed of staff representing Public Works, Capital Development Division, the Budget Office, the Sustainability Office, all city staff, and then city schools staff as well. So I want to give you a quick overview of sort of what the big moving items could be and are in our CIP. So the reason that we're talking about a project that's basically complete at this point is because it is part of that CIP picture. Because we could, if we wanted to, use some of these funds to pay down existing CIP costs that we've already incurred. So Charlottesville Middle School, this project is finished. It's got a certificate of occupancy now, so it is substantially complete in our parlance. It was a $94 million commitment, more or less. And so that's one of the big items in our funding picture. We're also working on the Charlottesville Early Learning Center. So no pretty pictures of the design process for this slide, but we do have some of that well underway. We are working on the lower part of the Walker campus for the project. This is the Early Learning Center. Approximately $55 million is what we think this will cost by the time we get it through construction. And again, we're hard at work on getting these design documents together, but this is an expenditure that we were already have incurred.
Marco,
Would you remind us what is already appropriated for that building?
There was 4 million, I believe, in 26, there's 10 in 27 and 30 million in 28. So 46, excuse me, 36, 34. I'll get in a second. I don't do numbers well.
30, okay, thank you. Thank you.
And we,
That's
you know,
44.
that's,
Does that sound right?
44, yes.
Okay, thank you.
so we don't know where this is gonna land quite yet. We're still pretty early in the design process. We just landed back at our original site. But we think ultimately somewhere south of 55 million is where we're gonna end up.
And that's keeping in mind, your previous presentation to council with the proposed Plan C. Is that right?
Plan C, yeah, that's correct. So building on the lower part of the site, demolishing the existing gym building, building a new early learning center in that location, and building a new gym to go along with that.
Thank you.
And for clarity's sake, that leaves open the A building for future uses, which will play into our plan going forward.
That was my question. So just to clarify, of that 55 million, 11 million is currently unfunded and not programmed in the budget in any way.
That's correct.
Yep.
Assuming the 11 million is the number, which I think it will be that or less. So I'm gonna run through some of the ideas that our working group came up with. This is more original information. I've got these.
Can I
laid-
interrupt you a second?
Sure, go
I
right
was
ahead.
actually right. I said the wrong number. So let me clarify. 4 million was budgeted in 26, 10 million in 27, and 20 million in 28, not
No.
30, as I just said. So it is in fact 34 million.
So 20 million on.
20 million is budgeted in 28. Yeah.
No, but.
But 20 million unfunded, yeah.
Unfunded
Yeah,
for
yeah.
55.
So we'll have more information as we get a little further down the road. We're trying to eliminate costs on that project as much as possible, but the construction market right now is working against us in a lot of ways, and you'll hear a little bit more about that coming up. So we set about putting together a list of the needs in the school system having to do with facilities. And we've got a rough idea of what those needs are now. There will be some conversation about scope and scale, which building. There will be cases where if one building gets a big project, another one doesn't need it, and we could flip flop those schools based on planning concerns that we don't fully understand at this point. There's also the question of, you know, Charlottesville High School, is that the first thing we tackle, it being the biggest fish, or do we get to that at a later time? These projects are sequenced essentially based on their value, so most expensive to least expensive, but that also is more or less the sequence that we were working with in our working group. So that's a conversation that can be had, and I think our friends from the school board have some thoughts on that as well.
So I have a quick question on that. Do we have, and I missed a couple of meetings, plans for those additions and renovations to the high school?
No, there are no plans for any of what I'm gonna talk about from here on down
Okay.
at this time.
Okay.
That's why you're looking at that not so elegant picture of the front door of Charlottesville High School. That's a next step, is to flesh this stuff out, and I do think that that's something that's worth maybe exploring a little bit as we move into, you know, putting this to a public referendum, but as of present, no. These are ideas, they're big picture, very high level, and I'm just gonna
Got it,
verb
got
them
it.
to you.
Yeah, I mean, just to highlight 2 points that Michael's just made. One, these are cost projections. They are very rough estimates.
Yep.
And second, and Chrissy will go into this next, as we get into a much clearer understanding of what the actual revenue stream looks like coming out of this, we're gonna have to match that to a project schedule as we're refining these costs. So, there's still a fair amount of
Mhm.
work to do.
The revenue from the 1 cent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
May I ask a question before we get too much further into this? For clarification, because I know it seems like it waffled a little bit over council and Counselor Snook even speaking to it a little bit, just for clarifying purposes. So this sales tax, these funds can be used for already dedicated or bonds that have already been put out, or is this future stuff? Because I thought I heard somebody say we could
So
pay
we
down.
have looked at that. There is legislative history that says that is not allowed. There may be an argument to be made for that, but we feel the safest bet is to assume that it's only for new debt going forward.
So not the middle school debt that we have.
Well, we haven't issued 30 million of
Okay,
that.
great.
So that could potentially be in the mix.
Thank you.
And I know we won't be able to answer it tonight, but I would be in the future just interested in having a joint conversation to really get into these high school plans. Because I know as a council as a whole, we've received the plans for the elementary school portfolio, but just haven't had that opportunity with the high school, so I really don't know anything about it, and I don't know, is it rooted in like wanting to increase the student capacity programming? I just don't know, and be curious to learn.
I do have a little bit of information on that I can share, and if you still have some questions after them. Then we can attack those. So the scope and scale of what's being proposed here is not a new high school. I want to make that very clear. A new high school, I think off the top of my head, would be something like a $300 million project in the present market. I know that sounds crazy, but I think that's right. $150 million, what we're proposing here, would be an addition to the high school. That addition is not really meant as a capacity driven change. It's more programmatic in nature. So, and Kim might be able to speak to this a little bit, but there have been some needs brought forward having to do with workplace education type programs that might fit into K-Tech if a student wanted to spend the part of the day that it takes to go to K-Tech. But if you only want to take a bite-sized piece, if you want to stay on your normal track, there are some educational programs that they could use some space for on the Charlottesville High School campus. The other thing it does for us is it frees up each of the parts of the high school so that we can do an occupied renovation. So if we wanted to just go into Charlottesville High School as it sits today and renovate the entire school, we would have to break that project into so many tiny parts that it would take the rest of our lives. A better way to do it would be to take a third of the school, for instance, and renovate that while school continues. You never have to empty out the school because there is no place in the city that those students could all go to be educated. So the new volume becomes a swing space, a lot like what we did at the middle school, actually. That was a test run for this type of project, and it actually worked. Well, depends on if you were a teacher in the school, how well it worked. You can ask them, but I think it worked reasonably well. And there was a lot of cooperation from the schools, but that's what we're proposing here is we build a new volume that has a specific need and purpose, but also in the meantime can be used as a swing space. So this becomes basically a 4-phase project. It's phase 1, new volume. Phase 2, 3, and 4 are going through the school in 1/3 chunks, kind of like what we did with the roof replacement. Because the school is kind of neatly carved into these 3 semi-equal parts. So that's what we're proposing here, and what the interior looks like. So there's a new volume, and then what in the schools. Additional windows, interior natural lighting has always been a complaint for the high school. We've done a few pilot projects to demonstrate how we could improve that situation in the science labs. I think that's very successful. Also, if you've walked around over there, the ceilings and lighting are poor. So some finishes should be replaced. There will be other things we identify, and we'll have to do our best to sort of fit this to cost, but that's what we're proposing for Charlottesville High School.
The only things I would add to what Mike shared are, when you talk about renovating the old spaces, beyond the lack of natural light, the restroom piece, we've made a big impact with the initial restroom renovation in what we call the B Commons. But all the other restrooms really need to be addressed to get them to current standards, and the high school is the place. Of course, our restrooms could use a lift in all of our vintage buildings. We're tackling our first elementary project right now at Greenbrier, which is really exciting. But operationally, the impact on safety and student health and well-being and their comfort using restrooms, like getting all those restrooms converted, is huge. As we look to prioritize our next set of restrooms we're going to go after, it's really challenging knowing what may lie ahead to pick like what's the next area and how to do it, because you don't want to make these big investments and not have your full plan baked out, because you don't want to invest in something and then, oh, well, that's in the way for this bigger thing we need to do. But the restroom renovation has the biggest operational and safety and just student well-being impact at the high school. The other thing I would add is when students leave the middle school where the classes are designed for collaborative learning and current instructional practices, when they go back to the high school, the classrooms are designed for traditional sit and get kind of learning. They're not designed to accommodate breakout spaces and where students go into small groups and can go into different areas and learn, because the teachers just don't have the visibility and the spaces to accommodate that. So that's another just reality of what we've got. The middle school, Buford, was no doubt our greatest need building. But that's just another feature, but beyond the CTE piece he mentioned, which is the long-term vision for what that additional volume would allow. It'll allow students to access workplace readiness learning and not invest a whole half of their day at K-Tech. That's big, and that's the long term. And then it provides that swing space to address natural lighting, to address restrooms. But then all those classrooms, in addition to the natural lighting, they just aren't configured to allow for the more collaborative instructional style that we now want to move more and more towards.
Do you mind talking a little bit more about what kind of programs would be offered for the?
So this is where, I'm the operations gal, and my counterpart, who is the chief academic officer, is at a conference right now, and she sits in the same work group with me. I know there are things in like the medical field, for example, and some of your just technology type jobs where it's not necessary to invest half your schedule for all the different programming that could be beneficial for those tracks. But I better be careful. I know I won't do this. I won't do this answer justice. I'm sorry.
And to follow up on that question, it sounds like maybe it's not fully fleshed out exactly how that would integrate with K-Tech's programming.
Oh, I'm sure that if Dr. Heltz or Dr. Isley were here, they could just give you all the information about like the types of the classes that really what makes sense at K-Tech versus what type of classes would make sense on a more typical, class block and what that would look like. I'm just so sorry, I'm not the person to speak to that, but they could have that for you at a future.
Thanks.
So the next school we'll talk a little bit about is Jackson Via Elementary School. It was built in 1968. This is the era we talked about in our last meeting, the sort of twins of schools that we built across the system. This is the era that I'm least fond of, I would say. 1968. It's an interesting time in America. So what we're proposing here is a new school construction. Now this is something that we could talk about and will talk about for sure. So this is a little bit of a placeholder, but this is the site that is, it would be most easy to build a new school on, assuming that there's gonna be the sort of changes in cohort size that could be driven by things like low-income housing projects and things like that the city might take on. And those are generators of large numbers of students. So that's something that we would have to work with our friends in the planning department to sort of work through and make sure we're planning an appropriate size school for what's coming. The other elements though that Jackson Via is not great about is natural light. Again, if you've been inside of that school, all the windows are about this wide and they are these floor to ceiling slits. So natural light is really non-existent inside the school. There are ways that we could work with that space if we needed to, but I think that given the fact that there probably will be a need in the not distant future for additional space in our schools, this is a good opportunity. And this is the school that I think at least the folks from the school staff believe is most likely to want to be replaced. I would say that there is a contender for that title though, and that's Greenbrier. Yes, please go
I
ahead.
also wanted to just confirm, that's also the school that does not have a cafeteria or a kitchen, correct?
It's not the only one, but it is
Right,
one
but
of the
it's one.
ones.
It's the only one that lacks both.
Oh, yeah, that is true.
It doesn't have either.
It doesn't have either.
It has neither a cafeteria nor it has no school-wide gathering space, really. I don't.
Right.
What were they thinking about in 68?
That.
Not eating apparently.
I'm
But I
sorry.
will say is that the design, I mean, if you're interested, the design was never to have walls at all for that school. The school was originally designed to just be an open plan. So the gathering space was everywhere. You could gather everybody anywhere you wanted to because there were really no walls or doors.
Full windows.
That didn't last very long at all before they started calling what at the time was the maintenance folks to start building walls because the classroom noise was getting out of control. But it was a common model during the period. And Greenbrier has the same problem. built in 1962. It also was built with no walls, and the reason I say it challenges Jackson Via is because, one, it's a less flexible building type to work with. So it would be harder to sort of work with the shape of this building and the bones of it to make a new, better building. And at present, there are a lot of classrooms in Greenbrier where you have to walk through one classroom to get to another. So that's a challenge, but I'll leave some of those concerns and arguments to the folks who know more about the program and who work in the schools. But this is another school that needs significant improvement, I would say. We're proposing a $50 million project here. That's a major interior upgrade and construction of a new entry vestibule. If you've been following for a while, you'll know that we spent a lot of time and some capital to put better entry sequences into our schools for the sake of safety. This is the one school that we have been really unable to come up with a good, easy solution for, just because of the way the entry is designed. It's really challenging to build a place to sequester people before they have access to the school. They work around it. It's safe for day-to-day operations, but it's not convenient at all. So, this plan would propose that we build something that's more of a permanent entry vestibule or entry sequence to the school, and then reconfigure some of those awkward classroom spaces. There are also some finishes that desperately need to be replaced, and this school has a particular problem with its plumbing system, specifically its waste removal, in that sometimes it doesn't remove the way it ought to. So that's something that we would like to address. And again, this is the era, all the houses in the neighborhood have the same issue, I can say. This is, I think, a pretty high priority school as well. $50 million is about what we think it'll cost to address those issues. And I don't think that that's a big new volume or any real change to what the school looks like from the outside, besides maybe a few more windows. But it would take care of some of those structural issues. Now we get into my favorite era of schools, Summit Elementary School, previously called Clark. This school is challenged because it's on a very small site. It can't grow out really at all without impacting parking completely. There's very little parking already. The play space is already rather small for a school of its size. What we're proposing here are interior reconfiguration and interior upgrades. The entry sequence here is also not great. We've worked with it, but it's not ideal. And we also have a lot of very old finishes. Now, I will say that this school doesn't have the natural light problems that some of our other schools have. Schools built during this era didn't anticipate having air conditioning necessarily, so big windows were necessary. And consequently, we have high ceilings and good lights in the classrooms. Now, that's not true of the entire school necessarily. There was an addition put on in the 1950s, which I think is of much poorer quality. And I never get tired of complaining about the fact that the floor plates don't line up, which you don't know why. You've heard me say this before, but I think that there could be an argument made for, while we're looking at all of this, for removing that addition and building a new addition that would be a little taller, probably, that would have floor plates that align, that would be a little more programmatically appropriate for modern teaching, but wouldn't necessarily impact the footprint of the school site. But that's something that we'll work through as we talk to the folks who know more about what's planned for future growth in the city. It's certainly something we would want to do some growth projections and wouldn't want to do willy-nilly, but I do think that would be an option for this site. But as it is, that's not what we're proposing. We're proposing an interior reconfiguration and some general upgrades.
Wait, sorry, we're not proposing what part of that?
A addition to replace the existing addition.
Okay.
This is not that. That would probably be more expensive.
Thanks.
Trailblazer Elementary, also one of the best sets of bones in the city. 1925 construction. This is the oldest of our schools that are still in the system. We're proposing a general interior renovation, classroom finishes. Again, it has good windows, good natural light already. There are some spaces that don't, and we would like to remedy that. But again, those are mostly addition spaces. Yeah, we've done a small project that we're working on this summer to create some more breakout spaces in this school, and that's really highlighting the need for more of that kind of small instructional space. You'll see that throughout the system, that's something we don't have and would love to have. Obviously, the ideal would be to have all new schools that are all modern and appropriate, but when you see the total number on this packet they're talking about, you'll see that we're not gonna be silly and bring that to you.
So with this, I know that the auditorium needed to be improved, but I can't remember if that's already been done.
We did replace the seats.
The seats, okay, that was,
Yeah. Yeah, the only auditorium, I think, the only auditoria that have not had their seats replaced, Greenbrier is one, and it's still got the old wooden, fold down seats that are very quaint. And then Charlottesville High School, which we have coming up as part of our project plan already. And then we get to Sunrise Elementary, 1958. Not ideal, but not the worst. Our classroom general interior renovations are what we're proposing here. Generally, I think natural light is not ideal, but it's not terrible either. This school could use some general interior renovations, some reconfiguration of space inside. The office, front office sequence is not ideal. It's workable, but it's not the best. So we're proposing a general, a little bit lighter lift than some of the other schools, but a general uplift on this school. And we think that'll cost around $25 million. And you'll see these numbers are essentially rounded to the nearest $5 million, just to be honest. It's at this level, at this point in time, we just don't have enough information to get too specific. Tall Oaks Elementary, 1955. Very similar. This is a twin to Sunrise, sorry. The name changes are. And it's a similar scale, similar scope. Classrooms need to be adjusted a little bit. Finishes need to be redone. All the schools need better ceiling treatments and things like that. And of course, with all these projects, there's an HVAC element. We'll have to look at the systems for all of the schools that we look at, make sure that they're up to current snuff. And there will probably be things that need to be adjusted and fixed and replaced. But we are at a place where we're only a few schools away from having good roofs on all the schools. We've just gone through the 3-year program for CHS. That roof is all new. Obviously, CMS has a new roof. The new school, the new pre-K center will have a new roof. So a lot of the exteriors and, we keep up with the exterior maintenance of the buildings. So it's not like we need to do a whole lot to the outside of most of these buildings, besides in some cases, cut holes for windows.
Speaking of roofs, with the new roofs going in everywhere, is there the opportunity to expand our solar PPA across to the other buildings?
There is, yeah, and we're currently working on that. So both CHS and CMS are the first step for us. We are looking and should invite Crystal to one of these meetings so we can talk a little bit about the plans, but we are looking at all the new schools. We plan to put solar on all the new roofs. It's just how do we do it? With the PPAs, they have certain needs to be able to make it pay off for them in terms of the size and the generation. So in some cases, it's going to make sense to do a self-funded model. In some cases, it'll make more sense to do a PPA. But we are seeing a very successful collaboration with the provider for our PPA at the high school and the middle school. So I think that is really opening the door and allowing this to become more of an easy route for us to take to solve these problems. So the answer in short is yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Do we already know what the HVAC situation is though, or you're saying it needs to be audited or?
we do know what the HVAC situation is. I don't know school by school off the top of my head. Because we do keep up with all of them. You all did just provide additional funding for us to upgrade that. So that has been a problem in the past where our HVAC systems were being held together kind of by duct tape and baling wire. But you all just approved some additional funding for our FM staff to look at new projects that'll help to, over time, get those things renovated and up to speed. So they're not in dire condition. I think they're workable for now, but a catastrophic failure of the school HVAC system is a lot more impactful than it used to be because of the warmer weather generally and the increased summer programming in the schools and all that sort of thing. So having it just not work is not really acceptable. Yeah, in general, I think we're in okay shape. I think we're gonna be in a lot better shape once we start to spend through some of those funds over the next 5 years or so and get everything up to speed.
So sorry, go ahead. So when a long time ago, when we had the last work session about the elementary school portfolio, we were presented that a lot of the elementary schools would need full HVAC replacement because those over the summer repairs weren't working anymore or weren't really sustainable. Is this additional money, is that no longer the case?
I would say that it is less the case. So it's the case today because we haven't started spending the money that has been approved for this fiscal budget that just started. But I guess my takeaway message would be, I think we're appropriately funded to get those systems up to modern spec. There may be cases, and I guess this was my point, is that there may be cases where we get into a school and it's like, oh, there's just an overwhelming challenge in this school that we're gonna have to put some real capital funding into as part of a bigger project. Or we do tend to like to, if we do a large scale project, for instance, the middle school pre-K center, we're planning on a geothermal system. We're going lead with those projects. So that's a horse of a different color. And I think when you start to get into that, you're not trying to, for the most part, you don't want to just stick that onto an existing system. You want to kind of refresh the whole system as a whole. So that you've got a, one of a piece system that runs off the same geothermal wells, for instance, and all that sort of thing. So it's a complicated answer to a simple question, but it just depends, I guess, is the simple way to put it. We don't think we're in dire straits, but I would say that we may see situations where a more holistic approach to heating and cooling is appropriate. So the last item I've got on my list of to-dos is K-Tech. And this is more of an interior modernization. We're thinking this is something like a $10 million project. This is the one that I can tell you the least about today. I would say that this is more of a general common areas upfit is what I would be envisioning here. A lot of the learning spaces in K-Tech turn over kind of regularly, and there's a lot of shifting and moving of those. So really, I think more of the commons is what I would be thinking with this $10 million modernization project. And this one, I mean, if I'm being honest, I think this is the one that I'm least sure is necessary. It's kind of why it's at the end, not only in terms of dollars, but in terms of timing. I think by the time we get here, K-Tech will answer a lot of the questions for us in terms of how it lives as a building, what is it doing for us as a system. But that's kind of, it's almost just a placeholder for the space because I think there will be needs at some point. But we don't really have a way of saying what those are right now.
I was reminded by Dr. Burley actually on text when I was fumbling my way through trying to explain the programming where we see holes in our current CTE programming. And one that's sort of glaring, especially on light of what Michael's talking about. So we have electrical and we have HVAC, but we do not have, and we don't have really space or capacity at K-Tech for building trades, and at least introduction to building trades, meaning the actual beyond the electrical and HVAC, but all the other components of building trades. And that's a really hot area with just the actual construction and things like that. So again, even in smaller spaces, those type of introductory programs that we just don't have at all could be planned for in that additional space at the high school. And again, you're not committing half your schedule, half your day. to getting that introduction.
Is the renovation at K-Tech something K-Tech students could participate in?
Oh, sure. Like, I think at the middle school, they did a great job of getting students involved. That was a really fun part of the process. We've even seen it with our elementary. The original renovations that we went through, we did this thing called FIPSI. It started back in 2017, 2018, where we wanted to just give the community, Mr. Wandy away will remember this. We wanted to give the community a taste for what it would look like to start lifting our school, our vintage schools with these, like, they started out at $1 million in the summer. And I'll never forget the kids at what was then Clark. They were involved with designing like what the improvements would be to their classrooms. And so we just worked with architect partners who really bring that. And then at the solar project at K-Tech, the students had different levels of involvement with that. And that's a much, recent one. So certainly lots of opportunities for that.
Yeah, I mean, like actually physically participating.
Oh, to do the work.
Yeah,
Um,
as a hands-on
hand
project
learning.
sort of learning situation.
That can get interesting because of the, when you're dealing with the contractors, yeah, exactly. But certainly with design and just, and learning from it, short of actually doing the work, I mean, we've certainly seen that in our work
Observation.
today. Yeah, Michael might want to add to that.
There are certainly spin-off projects that we could make. I mean, every project spins off. It's like a hurricane. It makes a little bunch of tornadoes, you know?
Well, here's a great one. The middle school, we have to reinstall the garden for the garden program there, which we're super excited about. The students have been so active in designing that, and the build out on the new garden space at the middle school is going to be exactly what you're asking, what you're looking for. Everything from the garden areas, fencing, different things like that. So that's an area you'll see that type of learning and development happening in the New Green area at middle school.
So to put a ribbon on all of this, the program costs that we see overall for the system with what I've just explained, we've already committed about $149,000, assuming that 55 million is the number for the pre-K center. All of the other things I talked about amount to $395 million. So that'll become a more, keep that number in your head, because what Chrissy's going to talk about will put that in a little closer focus.
And that includes the 149.
No,
It's 395
395
additional.
Yeah, that's right. So just to throw out some risks that we see with this program. So we're not the only people who now can do what we're trying to do with taxes. What I see as a person in the construction industry is a danger of escalating costs. So, and we see this with VDOT pouring money into our transportation program. We've gotten to the point where it's very challenging for us to deliver that program because we put a price on something, but everybody else is trying to get the same contractors at the same time. So their profit margin goes way up. And the cost of, the pay for contractors goes way up. And all of these things just, we're fighting with everybody else in the state at a certain point. I don't see an option for anything we can do about that, but it's just something to keep an eye on, because you're going to come back to me and say, you said this number, now it's this number. And I'm going to say, I'm sorry. Also, city project delivery. I mean, we are what we are as a city. We have the project management resources that we have. I think they're adequate for what we're trying to do right at the moment. But I do watch city council meetings. I see that this isn't the only thing that city council gets the pleasure of deciding to try and spend money on and solve problems. I'm sure that there are going to be other things. If all of those things also come to our project management team, that's a challenge for us. So there are reasons why we might want to think about that on the front end and come up with a project pace that takes that as well as our financial income from the tax into consideration. And hopefully that was some kind of segue for you, Kristen.
Thank you. So how much revenue would the additional 1% generate? I think just as a quick review, the current statewide sales tax rate is 5.3%. 1% of that is currently located to the localities, and 4.3 goes to the Commonwealth. Over the last decade, if you average out the city's sales tax revenue, we've averaged annual growth of about just under 3%. In FY25, we collected a little over 14 million. FY 26, our last projection was 15.6 million. And our budget for 27 is projecting $16 million. So per the legislation, as we've talked about, the additional 1% does not apply to food purchased for human consumption or essential personal hygiene products. The state is actually not, our commissioner has reached out to the state. This is not something that they routinely collect in terms of data. So they are working through this process as well to change their forms. They'll start collecting the data. But based on what we know from localities that already have this permission to assess this additional tax, and just from looking at some of our data, we're currently estimating that this would require about a 20% haircut off of our total tax collection. So where we, for purposes of this conversation, we landed on about $12 million a year is what we're thinking would approximately be available for as a result of this additional 1%. So if you look at that, here, this slide sort of gives you a range. You know, if we were at 10 million, 12 million, or 14 million, if you were to assess all of that, keeping in mind that sales tax is very dependent on the economy and human behavior, as we saw from COVID. You know, it has the ability to go up as well as down. If we were to look at annual tax revenue of about $12 million, that would, at max, with spending every dollar, leverage about $125 million worth of debt. And if you wanted to give yourself, depending on how much coverage you want to give yourself, you know, you could go down to about 65 million safely.
By coverage, what do you mean?
That revenue would actually cover your annual debt service payment. So, you know, on 125 million, that annual debt service payment is about $12 million a year. So if you issued $65 million worth of debt, that payment is roughly half of that. So you would have 2 times that amount of revenue to cover your debt payment.
Is there some sort of industry standard that one should be looking to as a rule?
It's a good question. Definitely at least one. But I don't know that there is, you know, I don't know. I could find out if there's an industry standard for you.
So is this assuming $12 million times 20 years
Correct.
yields $125 million worth of bondable capacity?
Correct.
Okay.
So kind of to answer that question, if we were to look at this, 12 million over 20 years is roughly $240 million. If we were to sell $125 million worth of bonds, with interest and everything, you're looking at about $184 million of total debt service. So as the graph illustrates, the tan or gray, however this looks to you, is, you know, just like your mortgage, when you start out in the beginning, you're paying, generally our debt is annual, equal annual principal amounts. And so you're paying more principal, less interest. And then as you go along, our debt payment will decrease and our cash or pay-go increases over time. So what happens is over the 20 years, we would end up with about $55 million of cash that we would also be putting back into the program. So over the 20 years, by the time you factor in the interest, you end up with about $180 million that's available for projects. So one of the things that we have been looking at with our financial advisor is what does this look like? What we do know is that the rating agencies does not look at this as a separate piece of our debt. It is considered part of our total debt. You know, obviously it has a dedicated funding source, But it does become part of our total profile. So just right now, without any of the extra things we've talked about today, as of June 30th, the city has $207 million of outstanding debt. 149-ish of that is general obligation debt, which are all the things that are funded through the CIP. And just over 58 million of that is what we know or call the self-supporting utility debt from our utilities. Annually, our debt service payment, budgeted for 27, will be $18.6 million or 6.7% of the general fund budget. And we'll look at this in just a minute, but based on the current 5-year plan that you have, that is projected to increase to over 26 million or 8.4% of the, and I have the wrong date there, I apologize, over the next 5 years. So to recap your current CIP plan, we have $147 million worth of bondable projects. Of that, 54.25 of that was for school-related projects, keeping in mind that 30 of that is for the pre-K center that's currently in the plan.
Chrissy, could I ask you, you mentioned there was a number there that was wrong. What's the number that's wrong?
The FY 28, it should have been 31.
Okay, I was guessing that, but yes, thank you.
Yeah. So.
Chrissy, did you have a?
No, that was my same question.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Keeping in mind, we do have a debt policy, that the debt service cannot exceed 10% of the general fund's total expenditure budget. And council, as part of that policy, imposed a target of 9%. So this table, this chart is one that we look at and that we use. We also present to the rating agencies. It is the way that we sort of manage all these pieces and parts of our debt program. We do manage the debt, and meaning that while we have a CIP plan, as things fluctuate, interest rates, the economy, the general fund, we are issuing the debt based on what we can afford and how it applies to our policy. As we've been talking about for many years now, we're not reaching our target at 9% because our general fund continues to grow. One of the issues that we have been speaking about on a regular basis is the affordability of our current plan. As I mentioned, the annual debt service, as you see from the third column over on the planning side, we're going from 18 to 26 million within the next 5 years, which means that those dollars are additional dollars that have to come from the general fund. We have been allocating 1% of, or the equivalent of 1% of meals tax for many years now, has been going into the debt service fund to build up a debt service fund balance. So these increased debt service needs have been, we've been covering sort of on an ad hoc basis annually, either with debt service fund balance. The 1.4 million that you see there in FY 26, the second column over from the right, that was actually the gain sharing that was returned from the schools that was put in to help offset some debt service. But as you'll notice for 28 and on, we're looking at an increased contribution from the general fund of just over $2 million a year to keep up with the increased debt service needs of what we're going to call the baseline CIP, which is the current plan that was adopted with the 27 budget. So when you layer all this in, as I said, the rating agencies will look at all of this debt combined. If we have the school piece, if we were to issue $125 million, that's the blue line there on top of the baseline, which are the numbers that you see in that box along the bottom. We quickly exceed the target as well as our 10% not to exceed number in every year for quite some time. if we, the yellow line I'm gonna show you in just a second, which is the max number, which right now, based on just these projected numbers, 35 million would be about the number that we would want to leverage for debt to keep at our target. And that would help us maintain our policy as well as our credit.
So
Anything,
that just to clarify, because you're getting lingo-y, it's okay, that's what you, that's your job. So I just want to make sure that I'm keeping up. So if the max insurance or issuance is 35 million, that's annually, that means we're using some amount of the 12 million in revenue to increase our debt capacity by 35 million, but we don't need all of that 12 million in order to do that. So the remaining 12 million we would use towards
You're stealing my slide.
towards paying down debt service?
no, because the 12 million can only be used for school construction or projects
Right.
and new debt. So
New
it
debt.
could not pay down existing debt.
Okay,
So what,
Except for maybe the 30, what hasn't been issued yet,
that's correct. That's new debt.
but it's already in our plan, the CIP.
okay.
Yep. So I'm gonna get to that in 1 second.
I'm just really glad I'm following along.
Yeah, no. So if we, again, if you look at this the same way, again, 12 million a year gives you $240 million worth of cash. If we were to bond $35 million, you can see that these gray lines or tan lines continue to decrease, but the amount of cash that you have each year is increasing. Your debt service is a lot smaller. It's 52 million. That gives you 185 million for PAYGO. So it gives you a total cash flow over the 20 years of $220 million that you can use for school projects, be it for school projects.
Can you go back to the previous slide? The next one, I mean, that one.
Mhm.
So I understand our policy, so what happens if we do, it's 12%, and then it goes down to like 11%, the blue line essentially. So if we do go over our policy, what that means is that will impact our credit rating, and when we do borrow money for the schools, then it'll be, or not just schools, but just, projects in general. The cost will be higher? Are they saying it's gonna affect,
It puts the city's credit at risk. With our, we have been talking to the rating agencies for the last few years that our current existing CIP is rather aggressive. It builds on issuing more debt than we've ever issued in the past. And so when you look at our debt per capita, it's getting up there, and we score lower in those areas because of that. So one of the things that this exercise sort of proved to us, and with PFM's help in looking at this, is that it does sort of confirm that our policy is sort of where it needs to be, given our size, the 10%. And so I think if we went to something of, if you intentionally exceed your policy, number one, that speaks to management, which is a ding from a rating agency standpoint. It also, as I mentioned, does put the city's credit at risk. And so, sort of summarize this, if we were to, so two things to summarize. At some point, once you make a decision on what the overall plan is, we will come to you with a recommendation of some mix of debt versus some mix of cash. If you were to assume that we would issue 120 on the top graph, if we were to issue $125 million worth of debt, then the little teeny blue lines are sort of the available cash that you have. Your debt ratio gets you almost to 12%. You have a cash flow over those 20 years of $180 million to invest in your program. If in this scenario, if we were to issue a $35 million bond, You have about $185 million worth of pay-go, so a total 20-year cash flow of $220 million. Again, more money because you're paying less interest. And it does maintain the city's credit, and it does keep our ratio within the target that has been established.
That seems better.
Still, 220 is pretty shy of the number Mike just gave us, so.
Yes.
Chrissy, how much of a change though? I mean, the city's had a AAA credit rating since like the 70s and has a very strong, stable University of Virginia employer base. I mean, what is the likelihood of a drop? And what would be the percentage point difference?
So
Two.
I can't speak for the rating agencies. There's a rather lengthy scorecard process that they go through. They typically look at your financials, your management, your economy, and all of those factors weigh in. Some of it is a mathematical equation. To have a policy and not follow it is a fairly serious ding on management. Also, to exceed sort of financial matrix that are outside the norm of your AAA peers, it is a pretty strong belief of our financial advisor that we would be putting our credit at risk. In terms of what is the difference on percentage, quite frankly, it depends. In a high interest environment, that could be significant dollars. In a low interest environment, it's maybe not so much, but it is definitely more of sort of a status and a black eye. To lose a AAA indicates something's not going correct. And so it's financially, sure, it's part of the puzzle, but it's also, it speaks to your credit worthiness and whether investors want to invest in your bonds or not.
Yeah, I've only ever seen that change like a half to one percentage point. So I'm wondering, we're not talking about 5% difference. We're talking about a half to a 1.
What percentage point are you
Like
talking
from a
about?
AAA to a AA, if that changed. But I'm hearing what you're
Like, what
saying.
would our
like-
interest rate change?
Right.
Yeah,
But I hear what you're saying, the black eye potentially.
but certainly 1% on $125
sure.
million is $12 million.
That's right. It's
So-
a project. It's a
One point
project.
two five.
Project.
Drop by
Did I do
factor
the
of
math
10.
wrong again?
When you do that. Makes you feel so much
That's
better.
why God made Excel, isn't it?
It is.
Michael, did you have
So I was
something?
good, not to minimize the importance of the bond rating piece, because that is very important. I think the other thing that worries me even more, just not with this, but just overall in planning, is the affordability piece. When we factor in our collective bargaining units, both on schools end, but also our city end, what's the point at which we have the cash flow to afford everything beyond even the rating? Which it sounded like, I don't know, you talked about like one of those pressures is even if we're below the 10% threshold, how affordable is it through the general fund?
Well, and it also speaks to your ability to do other things in the future. Because this is just based on the current plan that's in front of you, the things that you know about. We've talked about a lot of other things related to CAD and transit and affordable housing and all those things. Those are big numbers too. And so when all of that's got to sort of fit in here. And so that's sort of the slide about, do you leverage it all for debt service? Do you do some combination of the two? It does limit your flexibility to address other issues that you may have on the horizon too.
Chrissy, as I'm trying to understand this graph, does this mean that if we were for the example at the bottom, if we were to issue $35 million worth of bonds in year one, what exactly are the blue lines?
That-
Follow?
That's the cash, so it's this screen here. Your actual debt service payment goes down a little bit each year. And so because, let's say, for sake of example, you know, your 12 million stays static, then as your debt service payment declines, then you have the additional cash to use for the projects.
I mean, I guess what I was conceiving of was the thought that we would, you know, issue certain number of, you know, say, I pick a number, $10 million worth of bonds in year one, $10 million worth of bonds in year two, and always have more revenue coming in each year so that we end up issuing bonds of, you know, under that scenario, $200 million.
And that probably is the more realistic scenario because, you know, this is a
We can't
state.
spend all $125 million in one year anyway.
Correct. And we still have to comply with IRS regulations, which we have to spend the money in 2 years. And so we
Okay.
would be issuing, you know, there's a lot of what ifs in this scenario. First of all, 12 million is not gonna stay static. There's gonna be some growth there. And so interest rates are gonna fluctuate. So there is some timing aspect of it. But whatever debt you issue, just keep in mind, it lasts 20 years. And so
Yeah.
if we issue the debt in year 10, then when this revenue falls off, we've got 10 more years we've got to make up from the general fund.
Can you mention the you have to spend it within 2 years rule again, please?
Yeah, so if you sell tax exempt bonds, there's an IRS regulation. Essentially, they don't want you to go sell bonds, put it in an account and draw interest off of it. And so there is a requirement that you must spend all of those proceeds within 24 months. And if you don't, then you have to remit what they call arbitrage or interest earnings back to the IRS.
And have to be spent all the way, not like allocated to a project that
Correct.
hasn't been paid out yet. Okay.
So now, you know, most of the time, that's why if you go back to, you know, this chart here, these numbers don't actually match. If you were to go to the 5-year CIP, like this year, I think the CIP has that our bonds will be 27 million. We're actually only probably selling 20 ish because most of the time we're reimbursing ourselves for some expenses that have already happened. But we're also not going to sell bonds if the project hasn't started and we know we haven't spent those dollars or won't spend those dollars within the 2-year time frame.
Can I ask an ignorant question? So I think you've answered this before, but I just want to double check. So that assignment to capital does not include anything like bus fleet. That's not considered. It's got to be building, right?
So the only thing that's in the CIP that would be included here related to buses would be school buses.
Yeah.
And that's our match, or no, I'm sorry, that is, I gotta have that backwards. The only thing that's in the CIP here is related to CAT buses, but it is our match to the federal and state dollars.
Okay, but the 1% cannot be, it can only be used for buildings, not
That's
fleet.
my
Okay.
understanding. Build, construction or major renovations.
And then the earnings from the 1% cannot be invested.
They can be
They can be
invested.
invested.
And actually, I mean, practically speaking, let's say we move forward, the referendum passes, council passes the ordinance. We're probably looking at a year or two before we're even gonna sell bonds related to that. So there is nothing that prevents us from investing those funds. And none of those numbers are factored in here for just ease.
Sure.
Looking at that, but yes. Any other questions? I think that's all I had.
Just looking ahead at your immediate calendar, as we've referenced, July 20th is when we've proposed to put the resolution in front of council. August 12th would be, is an already scheduled joint city council and school board meeting for the purposes of talking about, the school budget and as it relates to the city's overall budget. August 14th is the last day, to receive the order from the circuit court to place the referendum on the ballot. Again, that's that 81-day rule we talked about earlier. And then November 3rd is, of course, the general election. Sometime following November 3rd, the council would adopt an ordinance to actually adopt the tax. And then 120 days after that, the tax would go into effect. So that's our chronology. That's our timeline from here going forward.
So, for today's purposes, we're going to go to about 5:45 to kind of flesh out questions and things like that. So I know we've been asking questions as we've kind of been presenting. So, but now we just kind of open it up to discussion and questions. So, because you all finished your formal presentation, so.
I guess first off, thanks for the invitation, allowing us to be here, appreciate that. But in preparation for the August 12th meeting, and if we're gonna talk about this, I'm curious as to at what point council makes a decision or what that looks like as far as which option you're gonna go with, as far as the debt metrics, the debt service. How much is that something you all have to vote on and decide, or?
Where's the final decision on that? There.
This is part of the budget process.
Yeah, that's where I was, yeah.
I mean, because it seems to me that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, please, that might impact what is being projected as far as projects and what those projects might look like. And so I don't know if that's gonna go back to the working committee.
Yeah,
kind of
so,
flush that
yeah,
out.
let me put that in the other direction. Which way we go in terms of how that structure goes in terms of bonding versus cash depends on, it's, as you say, it significantly influences how we structure the projects going forward, right? If we rely more on the pay-as-you-go approach, if we're using more cash to pay for projects, that also says that implies that we're gonna focus more on kind of the annualized set of funds and kind of multiple projects over time as opposed to one or two larger projects, right? If we're bonding more, that means we're probably gonna go towards an approach of a fewer number of larger projects. Whereas that program of smaller projects might be ones that we can actually pay for mostly out of cash over time going forward. That makes sense.
It does make sense, and I guess I lean into you all,
Yeah.
you know, to kind of present the options to the school board and to council. So that we can see what that looks like, and then weighing the needs of the schools,
Right,
you know, and what those projects
and the
are.
financial constraints presented by the city and trying to match those two things up into a funded school capital program.
So the CIP that we have now, that I'm on the committee and we meet periodically at Public Works, does that reflect the school's priority for school projects, or there may be?
So the committee itself, we did talk and introduce this wish list or this new prioritization list the last time we met. So I think, you know, some of those things but aren't necessarily showing up on the spreadsheet yet.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
I think that the work that was presented today is the staff working group that was composed of staff from both the city's capital development side as well as school staff. Sustainability and budget have also been involved in that. And that working group would likely continue their work using this information with feedback from council and the school board to kind of work towards what a work program that would look like that we can then bring into the CIP.
Right, so maybe Chris, if you can help me, if we're collecting, let's say, $10 million a year in additional taxes to fund projects. And, you know, let's say we choose one of the projects is, $50 million. And we have to use it within 2 years. So how are we, because I'm picturing myself now trying to explain to someone like in the grocery store or in the street, to be able to do it, because we're already starting to get you on me as well, emails like I'm already taxed,
Right.
enough. So I'm just trying to understand like the 2-year rule and then saving up for these big projects that very few of them.
Would it be helpful to use as an example, the middle school project, which was just over a $90 million
Yeah.
project? Like how many bond insurances did we do for that?
I think we did 2, but we only ended up issuing about 50 something million on the middle school because we got the state grant. Schools also contributed some of their gain sharing to that project. But to answer your question, we would time the bond sale for when the project was ready or shovel ready. So I would offer that rather than trying to back into the numbers, that you talk about the plan and what you want the construction plan to be. If looking at a $150 million high school renovation is where you want to be, then that would be where we would start. And then we know that we have some options for affordability. We could come back to you with other plans. Obviously, this 1% is not going to afford you that whole project either way. But I think it's better to talk about what you want that plan to be, and then we can make the financing work. I don't want you to get hung up on we can only issue $35 million worth of bonds. That's not what I'm saying. This is based on details that we know today. It's making a lot of assumptions about things that will or won't change. And so I think that what is a good takeaway is that probably it's most effective to do some mix between bonds and PAYGO. But I think that depends on which projects you pick. Because if you're talking about $150 million project, that's probably it. If you're talking about a $30 million project or even a $60 million project, you probably got multiples of those that you could do. So I think I would suggest that that's probably a better discussion at this point.
And so it's not that we have to spend the money within 2 years of collecting the tax, it's within 2 years of issuing the bond.
Correct.
So those are two separate.
We have to spend the bond proceeds. Yeah.
I would add to with the conversation about the timing and all those nuances. When you do a larger project like the high school, and we experience this with the middle school, and you especially will experience this in a highly competitive construction bid environment. But we've even experienced this with our small summer renovations. We were very good, and I should say I really need to give credit to Public Works and Mike's team at designing projects that have ad alternates, bid ads, and doing it in phases. Because the fact is you have to prepare that on bid day, you may be looking at bids that aren't in alignment with what your financial plans are. And so with something like the middle school, to make it really concrete, I mean, that whole fine arts piece was up in the air until what felt like the 12th hour, whether or not we were going to be able to do it. But we knew that we had a plan where we could proceed with everything else, whether that got to go or not. And when you're looking at what will likely be a very similar process for the high school, where you're going to have to build a wing that you can move and use as swing space, and then you're chunking that large project into phases that allow you to not only deal with the nuances of how the financing works and the timing requirements and all that fun stuff that Chrissy gets to deal with, but also it allows you to be responsive to whatever the realities are in the market when you're actually going out to bid. Mike, you could say more about that.
Yeah, I think that's mostly accurate. I think in the office, I like to call them valves. And some of you will remember that we came to you when we got bids in for the middle school. And the question that we brought to council was, do we open or close this valve? Meaning, do we do this additive bid item that we've got pricing for, or do we trim the project down? In that case, we chose to accept all the ad bids and do all the things that we had designed. That was maybe a different fiscal situation than we're going to be in when we do some of these projects, but that is the flexibility we can add to the project, and I do really like phasing large projects. Because it gives you flexibility going forward. There are unknowns that you might not see coming. And it's also good to have discrete project beginnings and endings. So that you can mark the milestone and say, okay, this much at least is done. And then we can go at it again.
But we don't ever do anything like, we'll commit to half of the CHS project and 2 other elementary school projects. Like, we like them to be full packages. I mean, I know that's different than phasing, but
I mean, we've never done that in the past, doesn't mean we couldn't. I think it's really a question of, you know, if there was something at CHS that was just at, like, hypothetically, you love the new learning space idea, but the rest of the school seems fine. So you would say, okay, we'll do the new learning space, we won't do the rest of the school interior upgrades and all that stuff.
Trick is defining a discrete project that you could end and be done with, right?
Right.
So in addition.
I mean, don't tell my high school junior that I just said that. Okay, we'll just take that off of the
Well, it's
motion.
completely hypothetical, of course, but I mean, yeah, we try and leave as many options available. Things change quickly, both in the world of finance and in the world of running cities,
So I had one more question of clarification. Lisa had, I asked a question, Lisa was like, well, it depends on what. As I understood you, Lisa, it's like, y'all's priority may determine which one of these options we choose to follow as far as funding when we do our budget.
So I think we have prioritized them, and if there's a spreadsheet, and I'm sure it was that you presented it to them. But I think we can maybe bring that back in August would be helpful. Based on the committee, I mean, and based on what that list looks like right now, CHS has kind of jumped to the top of that list. And there's some very important reasons, and I think hearing again from Dr. Gurley and Dr. Isley as far as the instructional piece. I think for those of you who have had the opportunity to walk through the middle school, incredible, right? State of the art. And if you haven't, we will set up an opportunity for you to do that. But then if you go and walk to the high school, walk through the high school. So I mean, that's kind of the why. I mean, and there's more to it as far as why that has jumped.
Right.
And what we might be recommending, but again, we are at kind of the mercy of of the funding. And so having this conversation, and I think putting it back to the committee to let them kind of work through this with the funding options and what, I mean,
The reason that I asked that is because we probably won't get into this until January, February, March, and really is it April? Or March is like when we have those those weekly meetings. I just wasn't sure, if that's when you were talking about when council is going to, talk about that. Is that too late? Or, for the timing of everything?
I'm maybe going out on a limb a little bit, but I think we'll need to carry some of this conversation forward at your next meeting, the next joint meeting with
On the
council.
12th.
I think the charge of that working group was to put together a financially unconstrained plan for the modernization of our school facilities. Kind of reasonable. It wasn't, and you heard the choices that Mike described where they, we didn't go crazy, right? It was reasonable, but it was still financially unconstrained. And now the question is, now that we understand the financial constraints, where do the priorities lie? And that's a discussion that I think has to happen with both the school board and the city council, because those financial constraints as presented, as we understand them, kind of say, you can do one, maybe 2 big projects, or you can do a multitude of smaller projects. And and smaller being relative, because we're still talking 25-30 million for most of those smaller projects. But that's a prioritization exercise. Which way do we want to go? Where's the priority?
I do wonder, could there be some modeling in that August meeting with the preliminary draft plan to see? Like if we do these smaller, then this is what financial impact and bond impact looks like, or if we go in the other direction, could we see some financial modeling with those so that there's more of a conversation to see what the impact really is.
I'd also like to say, I don't have a card, but I'm Amanda Foreman-Samalchik. I'm the Director of Community Relations for the schools. And I know that for us, it's also important, obviously, in passing a referendum, this is about engaging our voters to understand why this is such a good tool, and why this is, and what the significant needs are, right? So really bringing everybody on board to the needs portion, and then we're talking about solutions, but I think that we're interested in a community engagement process that would include involving citizens in what are the solutions that are most meaningful to you, and what do you want to see? While also sharing that this tool enables us to ask a lot less of citizens in the long term financially. You know, I know there's a piece of this referendum that we talk about sales taxes. Some percentage of it is funded not by residents at all, right, but by visitors to the city.
And I do thank you for bringing that up. I mean, I wanted us to take a step back because we're talking, and hopefully this does pass, but to your point, Mayor Wade, you know, that you guys are getting emails already, and people sharing concerns, asking questions. And I think it is important that we as the school division and as the city, you know, are sensitive to the fact of what people are asking, and just the times and the financial impacts or their worries or fears, but to understand again the needs of the schools and why this is important. And to Ms. Samalchik's point, you know, just how having this tool, which we've been asking for and fighting for at the General Assembly for years and years and years, now we have the opportunity to do it. And how does this benefit the community?
So, council, do you think it would be beneficial for Amanda to work with Afton to kind of put together some talking points, or is everyone's feel comfortable with where we are? I mean, as far as explaining it to the public, if we.
I think we're not quite ready for the talking points yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what they would be. I would like to have policy drive the talking points and not the other way around.
I think we could have, I know Ms. Samalchik's developing like a fact sheet for us, like just generally, like how did we get here? What was the process?
And again, what are the needs? What are the school facility needs that we know about, without presenting a plan for solving them that is fully baked, although we want to get to that point. That's certainly something that we have. And just even bringing the resolution on July 20th, perhaps you'd like something to just have talking points about that. And I have already had a conversation with Afton, so we're in connection about this.
Well, I think one of the things we have to determine, and you know, there's already kind of a inertia towards one of these options, but which is this replacing anything, or is it new funding?
It's new funding.
Well, that's a decision we have to make. Is do we lower something else to accommodate the fiscal stress on our community?
Oh, I see.
Like like technically that is something that we have to determine in the next budget cycle, is do we reduce something else in order to accommodate this, but then it's directed towards school funding especially. So the inertia is that it's for new, but that's something that we're gonna have to confirm. And that's a question that the public is gonna ask and has been asking already, is we're already spending this much. It cost me this much to go out to eat, and now we have to add it more. When we do have the capacity, technically, we have the ability to reduce a lever somewhere else. So that's something we're gonna need to make sure we're all on the same page about going forward. Just bringing that up to clarify. I don't want that to be a question that someone asks later. Well, why didn't you guys talk about that? Just kind of broaching that.
And I would think that it would be useful, and whether it doesn't need to happen before August 12th, but perhaps if it could be developed before then, it might be good, is to have a sense of, okay, the next project is Walker. When is it gonna start? When is it gonna be finished? You're just sort of the Gantt diagram of, okay, now we're doing this one, and then we're doing this one, and then we're doing this one. Even if we don't necessarily know what all of those are gonna be, at least to be able to say, folks, we can tell you, we've got a plan, Walker is the first step. And after that, for example, I had always assumed that the logical next step was to start working on elementary schools that have been revised because of what has happened with Walker and Charlottesville Middle School and so on. It would be nice if we could
Have a
It-
menu. to let
have
people
a
know
man,
what
or
the
just,
selections
or to give a sense that we actually know what we're doing and we're not just gonna make it up 3 years from now.
We have.
Yeah, I thought, it's very colorful.
Yes,
Is
we've
that
seen that. I think the
different?
difference is that is TBD. Like the order of things is TBD. The things are all concrete items we would like to see.
I don't remember having seen
It's in the packet
that good.
for today.
Sure.
I think it was the one online. But that is a selling people on the timeline instead of selling people on these are the things we could do and we haven't determined the timeline yet. So. First
think-
one.
I think some of it, yeah.
Yeah, I
Mike-
think
Mike
that
Goddard,
is-
you know, has, and can get for you all, but
Like it.
definitely to bring it.
I guess to me, the big question is, I'm fully in support moving forward with the sales tax referendum this November. It's been a long journey to get here. And no matter what, we know, even with the sales tax, there's gonna be more needs than there exists. Capacity to meet those needs. So we might as well move forward with it. But I guess the big question is just adding up the school projects. Or the elementary school projects without K-Tech and including the unfunded part of Walker, that's 255 million without cost escalations that may occur. So if we're talking about 150, and that's already above the sales tax revenue. So if we're talking about 150 to 200 million above this new sales tax revenue, I just don't know if we're literally gonna be able to afford that. We've increased taxes multiple times. We have among the highest meals tax and lodging tax rates in the state. We have room to we're still not among the highest on real estate tax, but that comes with legitimate trade-offs. We still haven't incorporated the full costs of collective bargaining on the city or schools into our budget. As you all very well know, you have very legitimate needs for unfunded positions that are also not incorporated into our budget. We have staffing positions on our end we need. So again, I just literally don't know if 150 to 200 million above the sales tax is possible. So it may be a choice between, is it the elementary school portfolio or is it the high school in this 20-year period? And just from our last discussion among all of council, my understanding was that the elementary portfolio made more sense as a higher priority, just because at least at that time, it sounded like a lot of the HVAC systems likely needed a full replacement, or it may be just a good idea to do a full replacement, as well as the fact it seemed like those were the schools that had the biggest deficiencies in terms of like no cafeteria, no school-wide meeting space.
They're the oldest.
Right, and they're the oldest, and those are the ages which are most critical for the achievement gap. But that was the conversation at that time. Admittedly, I haven't been part of any conversations about the high school, so honestly, that's just my perspective from having heard the past conversation and nothing about the high school. But again, that to me is the biggest outstanding question. If we can't do it all, what do we do?
I have a couple other questions that are a little potpourri style from random parts of the different pockets we have. One of the things listed on the packet was the Rose Hill entrance concept. What's that?
The CELC.
Oh.
Back to the.
That was version B of the Charlottesville Early Learning Center concept. So that was the terraced scheme. Sorry, the Rose Hill is the new scheme. That was the Gentry Lane scheme. So that's version C, version A.
Okay,
Both use Rose Hill as their front entrance as opposed to Gentry.
okay, got it, thank you. And the renovation of the Performing Arts Center at the high school, what is the need for that and what does that look like? Just separately from the rest of it.
Mostly it's carpet and seats. There's also some lighting upgrades. Some of the technical lighting stuff is a little doesn't work great. So replacing that, but the big cost item, the cost driver there is new seats.
The seats allowed.
You're old.
Yeah,
And parking, it's a lot of.
yeah.
There's a lot of carpet there. And then do we have, but this is separate from what we're talking about, but related. Do we have any more idea of what the $43 million UVA has for an early learning centers going towards? What does that look like? Are we factoring? Do we have anyone we're talking to about that?
That has nothing to do with us.
And that money is not allocated to.
So I know it's not going to us, but how is that going to affect what we're providing, what our needs and is that gonna pull certain kids out of our learning center? What is that for just staff and it could be from anywhere? Do we know how that's going to affect what we need to provide? I know it's not going towards us, believe me, but
I believe it's 0 to 5 and it's 100 students total.
yeah, so just
don't know.
how does that affect our landscape is really the question. Okay, and then just because it feels like the conversation about the high school is kind of fresher to us than the rest of the things that we've been talking about. Can we get a little more background on who's asking for it? Where did the ideas come from? What's the plan? You know, the students are coming out of the middle school for the first time, the completed middle school for the first time next year. So how, I mean, are we planning on collecting data for performance once they're in the like, does it change from the new school, the shiny new school to the as is high school? Is that actually going to make a difference or not? I think that's stuff we need to consider before spending a lot of money on this. So just a little more background about the genesis of this project, I think would be helpful. Sure. If you don't mind.
I can say that.
Oh, was that a question?
Yeah,
I'm writing the question.
Like a brief thing now, if you want to do a more extensive one.
So when you,
later.
the people who lead instruction for our school division, when, as they've spent more and more time, and we've now lived with the new middle school for a year, and just, I know this is gonna sound like a fuzzy answer, but the feeling that you get and understanding what they see with how instruction works in those spaces versus seeing and experiencing and living what is at the high school right now, it's just a very stark difference in reality that folks who actually lead instruction should speak to, and they will, I'm sure. So to your point, that's a question that Michael told us was sort of brewing around. I would also say though, back to the old FIPSI thing, when we were just starting to try to get momentum with lifting our old facilities. When we started and we were like, okay, if we go into Summit, which was Clark back then, what would a current educational space look like, right? We always had the guiding principle that whatever class, if the project in a school was going to be to lift a grade level, because we knew we didn't have enough money or enough time to do more than one grade level in a summer, it had to be the 4th grade. It had to be the highest grade level in that building, which was 4th at the time, because you didn't want kiddos going from, you know, a really great or, you know, a lot more light or different features in 2nd or 3rd grade or kindergarten, and then feeling like the next year, wait a minute, this room isn't as nice as the one I was in, you know, before. And so that's just like this fundamental guiding principle that we had all the way back into the 2017, 2018 timeframe when we started trying to do these little $1 million summer lifts. There's just this idea that you don't want, as people, as you know, and even for kids, just that feeling of like, oh, I'm stepping down because I was in this really great space and now I'm stepping back. But much more important than that is the instructional piece and the talking about like collaborative learning versus what I'll call traditional sit and get classrooms, which is what the time period our high school was designed in. There are some great spaces in our high school, but they're more the atriums and the common areas. That's where all the big windows are. The classrooms are just a totally different story.
Yeah,
For the most part.
I was a CHS grad.
Oh, you
so
guys-
I know,
That
yeah.
the cavernous feel like when you go into some of those rooms off the media center where there's just no light, and you're just, and cinder block walls.
I'd like to just add to that the pivot to thinking about CHS first also, or it comes from
the current Charlottesville City Schools strategic plan, one of the main pillars is about creating life-ready graduates. And I think that you see a lot of, a shifting focus from just thinking about helping kids get to college to the acknowledgement that not all kids want to go to college, and ensuring that we're strengthening the pathways for other routes. And so so Kim is referencing the interior upgrades of the rest of the building. And then in terms of talking about the new addition that would support career and technical education, another piece that we just haven't mentioned is that Dr. Gurley is interested in the creation of an ROTC program.
Yeah.
And so those are two examples that really reflect how wanting to ensure that those students who aren't headed to a four-year college feel supported starting from 9th grade through 12th grade, and the acquisition of K-Tech and ensuring the success of K-Tech for the future was a significant part of that, ensuring our students would continue to have access to that. But as folks are saying, it's about 11 different trades that are served there, and it requires students to be there for half of their school day. And it requires them to want to choose to invest in one of those 11 pieces, whereas we know there's a huge, much larger future focus of students that doesn't include, that isn't served by those needs, and that's what we envision for CHS is really, and then I'll also, because I'm a PR person, I also just have to say that we know that CHS is a symbol of the city, right? That I think that it's where it's the pride of this city, I think, in many ways, right? That being a Black Knight is a pride of the city. And I think that now that we see what's possible at CMS, we know we want that for the city.
So it's all legitimately and genuinely very important. This is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but obviously literacy and numeracy is critical, not just for those who are going to college, but to be successful in the workforce, even if you don't go to a four-year college or even an associate's degree. As we all know, I think about 40% of Black students pass statewide. Reading standards, about 90% for white students. The achievement gap is massive, and those critical years are K through 3. And after the 3rd grade, it really starts to compound and become harder to solve. All of which is to say, do the existing elementary school facilities for those K through 5 grades, are they sufficient in terms of the ability to have programming that's best serving that kind of need? Because I know that legitimate need exists at the high school, but is it also met at the elementary schools?
So when we have the conversations in our work group about the programming piece, which again, my colleague, Dr. Isley leads a lot of that conversation. When you hear us talk about the elementary schools, it's more about, yes, we want to lift all those restrooms, although we definitely need to prioritize all of the CHS restrooms over the remaining elementary restrooms. It's about the, secure the lack of a security visitor vestibule, lack of natural light, all those things. I can honestly say that in those conversations, you don't hear the same level of concern or any level of concern necessarily about how our elementary instruction works in concert with the buildings. It's not to say that there aren't areas for improvement. Lack of natural light in some of the buildings, those 60s, 70s era thing, that's a real thing. But it is definitely, as I listen to my colleagues who lead instruction, it's nowhere near, it's just not the same level of concern, if any concern about the instructional piece. It's more about those specific things that we listed on those 2 buildings. And it's just, that's where those conversations have been. And we've talked deeply about all these aspects of every building.
How is that going to change with 5th grade moving?
So you make a good point, because those that collaborative instruction breakouts does play more of a factor with the older students, and you're correct, we are moving the 5th graders in. So again,
The school in elementary school.
Our elementary schools are going to get a little older, right? So I would think, yes, with
And more
5th graders.
I would think, right?
Well, no, what we did, we're living this right now. So we took preschool out and put 5th grade in, and we've moved the grade levels around within the buildings. This is the summer of reconfiguration, a lot of moving parts. But we basically swapped preschool classrooms for 5th grade classrooms, although we had to reconfigure within the building and bump grades around, but it wasn't a space issue.
How do the numbers work out? I mean, how many fifth graders versus how many pre-K as we're swapping?
So when we did the elementary rezoning that we did a little while back, we factored in reconfiguration and we ensured that we have adequate space in all of our elementaries, and all public schools right now are being helped by the declining birth rate, which is across the nation. So we don't have capacity concerns this time. The only one that I'm still keeping a close eye on is honestly Jackson Via with the South First Street opening. I was surprised we didn't do that. The consultants' work didn't reflect a need to do more moving there, but we also have some special needs programs there, the LEAP program, which we had some flexibility to move classrooms to other elementary schools to balance out capacity. In all honesty, managing capacity across 6 elementary schools in 10 square miles is not for the faint of heart, because there's a lot of movement going on in a small area, and getting it to land right and maintain our neighborhood elementary schools is challenging, but so far, you know, we're okay. And capacity is not really a feature of these conversations we're having either with this. We clearly have to be mindful of it. And if you followed our redistricting work from a year or so ago, really a lot of that's about the intensity of high density development around Summit, our school on a postage stamp, and then the domino effect that sets into play across the city, because Summit simply cannot hold what is happening in relation to the affordable housing developments and other just housing developments, higher density developments that are going on in that particular zone. And so that caused us to have.
So we just got a few more minutes. Jen, did you have any comments? I mean, we're gonna have another opportunity. This is a good, starting off point to get, some idea of what we're doing. I know we have a timeline, but we just have a few more minutes for today. And then we're gonna talk about, I don't think you heard this, Michael and Lauren, maybe you did, but we're gonna spend just a few minutes to talk about different projects. Our committees that we're on. So.
We got 2 minutes per.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, I don't have anything else except, or sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the questions I have are really about, can we get more visibility on like the rubric of the prioritization for schools? Because I'm not sure I know what our goal is. Is the goal to close an achievement gap, or is it to get more work-ready students in the next 20 years? Because we're thinking of this kind of in a vacuum, like we don't have any idea what AI impacts any of this algorithm. We don't have a sense of what does, what does an environmental diaspora look like? We just don't, there's so many unknowns at the moment. So if we could get a sense of like, what are we aiming for with these, with the redesign, or, with the priority list, and what the rubric is for how things pop to the top, it would kind of help us. I think it would help us understand what we're really aiming for. And because I think on a base level, investing full stop in elementary, as Michael's saying, is like statistically your better achievement gap priority. But if we're saying, that's not the goal of redoing these schools, it's a different goal, then it's easier to frame it that way. And so I kind of just need some guidance there.
I think both can be true, right? One is about instruction and one is about facilities. And so can we continue to work on robust instructional goals and, continue Dr. Gurley and his team to do that work? Yes. And we can also build state-of-the-art facilities that reflect where we see a trend in better outcomes. We are seeing a trend in better outcomes. If we go back and look at some of that data from last year in our younger grades. So we are seeing the achievement gap, some changes in those K-3 spaces, even up to 5th grade right now. And so I think both can run true and both are part of the strategic plan.
Yeah, and that's reassuring that it's a win-win when you're investing like this, right? I think we're gonna have to decide, but who goes first?
Right.
And so that piece of the rubric would be helpful to know.
So
Don't ask Theo Fisk. He's gonna tell you the high school, because the floor drives him crazy, but it's for real. It is hard to know. we're gonna have to make a really tight decision based on the lack of cash. And so anything that can help make an informed decision that way would be helpful. Knowing that we're gonna win no matter what we invest in because it will create those benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been trying to, and I wasn't ignoring you, Natalie, when you were talking. I was writing your question down so
fine.
that, you know, try and prepare us so that we can
Yeah.
bring some of this back to our next meeting together. So.
So just any last question here before we go into our recap of our different committees and things that we set up? So I think we got some good questions started this dialogue. I think we'll be prepared. The joint meeting on August the 12th will be fruitful, so. James, before we go to any other questions y'all had to wrap this up before we?
I think we're good.
Okay.
You're welcome to stick around and hear a recap.
So, Jen, I think that you said you didn't have, you didn't have any meetings,
Yeah, Natalie reminded me, I did have one that does not match, was not with one of the other of you. So most of my commissions took a summer recess for June or July, and the one we did work on was the planning and development work group worked with the Stribling Avenue neighbors on their sidewalk project. So we're working together to determine how to best meet their needs for safer streets and for all users and within the constraints of funding and
Our limited resources there as well.
limited resources. So that's an ongoing conversation that we're working on with Public Works and the neighbors themselves and has been pretty productive so far.
Natalie?
Sure. I had the pleasure of joining Michael at the Fifield Habitat for Humanity dedication. Three families got homes in the neighborhood and they had a lovely ceremony at Fifield Park. I went on the neighborhood walk. It was Locust Grove last month. This weekend, it's going to be a meeting over at UVA and we're doing Lewis Mountain neighborhood. I met with Delegate Carlson. We talked about some state advocacy opportunities. Went to the planning development meeting with Councilor Fleischer to work on the Stribling project with those neighbors. It's been a great partnership so far. I attended the decarbonization study webinar and the meeting last night that C3 hosted in this room with the consultant to provide opportunity for community feedback and updates on how that's going. And then at MPO, we got Smart Scale and STARS project pipeline updates, as well as updates from both city and county staff on what's going on in our region. And then had the pleasure of joining our mayor and some other folks at the Wayway Tenango events last week, the 50th Downtown Mall birthday party in the heat. And then it was great to see the Seville Spectacular fireworks. That's
It's busy.
and on a high note.
Yeah. Lloyd?
Well, the only meeting that of a regular board or commission I've attended in the last few weeks was Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority, where it was largely just sort of a check-in on the kinds of things that they're doing. And I'm not sure there's any great news that hasn't been out public in the world about the construction projects that are going on. Another meeting that I was involved with, that I'm on the Virginia Municipal League Legislative Committee, and we had a statewide Zoom meeting on June 24th. Unfortunately, it was almost entirely devoted to what the heck's the budget gonna be. We were at that point still a day or two away from knowing whether there was even going to be a budget. And so I was trying to rack my brain to think, was there anything that we actually talked about that's still a live issue today to report back on, and not really. I also enjoyed the 50th birthday party and the snaky thing that was going down the mall. That was kind of cool. I'm not quite sure I understood the light show at the end. I thought it was more an homage to the vape shops on the mall these days than anything else, but it was fun.
Yeah.
And for boards and commissions, CRHA has obviously had very fun events recently, but the CRHA board is interested in moving forward with creating a subcommittee to put out an RFP for an organizational assessment of CRHA, looking at other housing agencies, other housing authorities, what can they do to improve, where is customer service and administrative capacity lacking? So hopefully that will be good. Local Energy Alliance Program, LEAP, have also, you know, in fun times, having new programs at the state level will be coming on later this year, but funding through bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act programs have been cut. So they're still really trying to figure out basically how to get bridge capital between now and when those new programs will begin. Finance Committee met in addition to the recent meeting we had about the inclusionary zoning tax revenue that will be coming in and possible ways to spend it. Our most recent one was about potential financial impacts of collective bargaining on the city end, not all of which we've budgeted for yet, and are gonna be substantial going forward. And it's a regional housing partnership meeting, nothing too substantive or new was discussed there, honestly. That's about it.
Yeah, so it's a lot as well. As y'all were talking, I was remembering just different things just over the last few weeks. Had a meeting with the executive director of the center, after a Tai Chi, one of my Tai Chi classes helped me. And had a meeting this week with the Climate Collaborative, and you went to the dinner last night, or yeah. Had meetings, I'm on a committee with the National League of Cities, and also next week, meeting with the Virginia Municipal League. I'm on an infrastructure committee with them, and we're meeting next week. Of course, met with Katrina. Today, I had a meeting with the Chamber Policy meeting where we got an update from Katrina and Creed. Had the JABA meeting, a big convention, Charlottesville, Albemarle, convention and tourism board meeting, and had a great time with our friends from Guatemala. They safely got back on Monday. They came here during the hottest spell that we've had, but they still were smiling. But we changed some things so that he can go back and cool off and rest. And he liked the fact that they were at Hampton Inn, that everything was pretty close, whether it was Carton Hall, Downtown Mall, or everything was close. Except for when we went down to Scottsville on the Fourth, yeah. So they got full Americana, and so did I say that loud? I'm sorry.
You take it into Buena Vista.
Yeah. Had a city county meeting where we talked about the follow-up for the chamber visit that we had to Chapel Hill, where we're looking at how we're gonna follow up on those things. And I think the public should know that Natalie and I meet with the chair and the vice chair of the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors, Ned and Fred, on a monthly basis where we talk about issues, and so that we did that.
Great.
Yes. And, you know, I did a lot of it, but met with countless constituents. And, but I think it's healthy that we do this so that people know that in addition to the 2 meetings that we have on Mondays, and now this meeting, that it's tons of other things that we do where we really are getting down to the granular level. Yes. There being no other business, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Thank you.